Good morning, 11 STEM Hope. So, if you may ask why you are here, because of we have to make some adjustment because of our problem in our internet connection. So, I am recording this video while discussing our supposed to be our topic for this morning. So, what you are going to do is you're going to watch this video because we cannot do such discussion using or video conference using the Google link because of because of internet problem. So upon discussing, you may take notes of the important information that I'm going to share to you on this video. Now afterwards you're going to give your realizations or your what you learned from this video or your opinion, and you're going to comment that one on our Google link in a essay form. All right, so we will proceed now. This we already done talking about what is disaster and the gravity, the heinous effect of this such disaster in every community or in even in our personal life. So pertaining to the disaster, it contains a lot of possible hazards in different places, and especially we are vulnerably, especially in economic aspect, right? So it's very important to know disaster because by knowing we can now prevent or lessen the harsh effect of such disasters. All right. Now, so steps for implementing disaster risk reduction strategy. First, let's should ensure that disaster is a national and local priority with strong institutional basis for implementations. So there is the disaster preparedness should be evident in our local level, in our government or in our community, and should be initiated also by our national level in government or in every private institutions. Second, let's identify some hazards and assist and monitor those disaster risks just to enhance some early warnings for us to avoid or mitigate the problem. So that's how it was. And third, use knowledge, innovations, and education to build a culture of safety and resilience of all level. So this is why DRR is being implemented in K to 12 to share the basic knowledge on how to prepare yourself and to identify and to assist or assess your own community or even your household for some hazard or early warnings out there for you to avoid such disasters. And fourth one, reduce the underlying risk factor. So this is one of the purpose why we tend to have this subject course. Strengthen disaster preparedness for effective at all level. So we tend to preserve life because life is one of our priority, and we tend to mitigate this disaster risks. All right, and for the components of disaster risk reduction, so the first one, we have to mitigation. We have to mitigate this such event. So it measures to be taken before and after the event. So with before the upcoming disaster, we tend to assess our own community, our own backyard. We look for any risk factor out there, and we tend to fix those problems just to mitigate the disaster effect. So we tend to lessen the effect of such disaster. Just take for an example. We know that there is a typhoon. How can we mitigate the effect of typhoon? We know that it's going to blow up our roof and destroy our properties. So how can we mitigate? First is we tend to install some additional stronghold just to hold our roof. We put some rope just to hold our house and to avoid from laceration from the strong wind. And we tend to evacuate our family just to mitigate the possible loss in life because of the disaster. Because we all know the typhoon are getting stronger. And after the event, we tend to assess to evaluate what are some improvement that need to be done upon engaging in this such possible disasters, diba? So after the typhoon, we tend to allocate some money for disaster preparedness, and we tend to fix the design possibly of our roofings just to counter balance the strong wind that hits in your community. Second component of disaster risk reduction is the preparedness. So measure to be taken before and after an event also. So it's something to do with also the mitigation. By how can we mitigate or lessen? What we are trying to say with mitigation is to lessen the effect of the disaster, such fire or typhoon. How can we mitigate? By doing such preparations. So what are your preparations? So now, depending on the disaster that you are trying to mitigate. So if your area has the possible, um, is a prone for fire, so you tend to prepare such preparation just to mitigate the effect of fire, or even in a landslide area, you tend to mitigate your the effect of that happenings by how can you prepare your family for the possible landslide is just to make it simple, just try to evacuate and look for the safer area, because you definitely saw an early warning out there, and then you have the responsibility to take your family into safety by evacuating, right? And also, if there is a possible volcanic eruption, you take an action. If you stay, you will definitely die. Your property will be destroyed. If you don't make any action, try to migrate to the safer area with the less geohazard. The third one is the component of disaster risk reduction is response. Measure to be taken, especially during and immediately after an event. So this is usually done by our national government partner with the local government, and also to those who are possibly in need. We tend to help those survivor or the people who are in need with immediate help, because as much as possible, we even during the disaster, we tend to help and we tend to rescue and preserve the life as much as possible. Now, in the case of we experience the typhoon Odette, we cannot take um, an immediate response during the typhoon, because the wind is very strong and it can harm or put into danger even our rescuer itself. They cannot do such rescue operation because of such this strong wind. So it could be possibly we should expect the worst. And we can only apply the response. What that we are trying to say is immediately after the event. So that's why in the mid morning, we saw the actions and the rescue unit in the local government and are really in the field and trying to rescue other people who are in need, especially in our national government. They immediately conducted an evaluation on how to do and how to respond and to give an immediate help to the victims of the typhoon in different places in the area. And the last part, post disaster measures, is the recovery. So it's very important that we are not only helping them during the disaster, but also we need to help them to recover, because possibly they most of them they lost their job and they don't have an enough financial capabilities to build their houses and to bring back their old life somehow. So now it's very important that our local government should give an extra mile, an extra help, especially a financial assistance to those victims, just to help themselves to be recovered in such disasters that they experience. Because being a victim is not very easy. We need a guiding hand and financial assistance just to make them recover in such disaster. So that's very important. Yet. So first we talk about mitigation, right? So it's an effort to reduce the loss of life and property, as we said before. So mitigation includes recognizing that the disaster will occur. So in short, we are expecting that it's going to come in our place, in our community. That's why we tend to prepare. So an attempt are made to reduce the harmful effect of the disaster. So it's inevitable. We cannot deny the fact that it will have a negative effect to the community, and we tend to lessen by mitigating the effect of the upcoming disaster or the limit their impact on human suffering and economic assets. The type of mitigation is the primary mitigation. So it's referred to increasing the resistance to the hazard and reducing the vulnerability. So the very evident example is the primary mitigation is how can you mitigate your your community into the effect of the upcoming typhoon is warning, giving a warning sign to the community so that every household can prepare and install whatever they need to install have just to put their household into have just a sort of to have a fighting chance for the strong wind of this upcoming typhoon. And secondary mitigation is referred to reducing the effect of the hazard by preparing. So the secondary mitigation is we can do in such in a way people can evacuate immediately ahead of time before the typhoon hits or when will be the possible expected coming of the disaster. So it's very important to have some mitigationary actions in every community, and everything is start with in our personal household. How can we avoid or lessen the effect of such disaster? Commonly, fire, earthquake, typhoon, and possibly nuclear explosion. We don't know. So, the various approach and strategies of disaster mitigation. So, some we already shared some information about this various approaches. So, risk identification is how can we mitigate the possible disaster in every community that we are belong to. First is very important is to identify the risk. What are the risk factors or possible risk in every community? So especially in the community that you are belong, so you should identify what are the possible risks in your community. If your community is located in the mountainside, so what are the possible risks there? Landslide, if due if there is a possible heavy rain for the long duration of time. So land use planning, so it includes mapping of the disaster prone area. So because first you identify the possible risk and you start planning and mapping the disaster prone area in your places, and number of livestock per area, crop density, and population density and road network location of the shelter. So you tend to set an allocation in your land territory of your community and where to put or install an evacuation area, and to identify every member of the household during response and rescue operation if the worst things happen. So to identify every quadrant of your territory and who live there, who are the family members, you should everything put into record to identify them, because if they fail to be located in the evacuation area, the rescue team, the local government, can immediately know where to find them, where are their household, because they are not cannot be found in the evacuation area, all the location of the set of the shelter that you planned before the disaster happened. So that's very important. The third one is the structural and non-structural. So mitigation measures may involve construction like dike, flood protection walls, and also ecosystem-based approach to flood and erosion control. So these are the way of mitigating the problem in a and it varies and the types of the disaster that they are trying to prepare. So there's a various types or way of how to mitigate different types of possible disaster, like dikes and flood protection wall. We tend to build those infrastructure just to protect community from possible ano increase in the level of any water formations or water forms out there. And for the coastal area, we have some huge walls installed in the coastal area, especially in the Philippines. Those community who are facing the Pacific Ocean, where there are where the strong typhoon being born there, and we tend to protect them from the strong typhoon. Our government tend to invest a billion of money to build a seawall just to protect them from such storm surge and protect the community, to give them a fighting chance, just to mitigate the effect, the the, s- the strength of such typhoon that might hit on those community. So for the different approach of mitigation or mitigating the landslide prone area, we tend to improve the ecosystem out there. We tend to plant more trees just to hold some land formations there to avoid them from collapsing, or just to control the soil erosions. We tend to plant mangrove forests just to lessen those water related risk during the disaster, right? The fourth approach might be the disaster relief and rehabilitations. So in which this is we can strongly observe the people who help each other, the beauty of humanity, because we help one in hand we help each other during the disaster event due through disaster relief and rehabilitation operation. So we those people who tend to help the victims, the survivors, they supply emergency and humanitarian aid, such they give food, medicine, temporary shelter, um, basically all the basic needs of the victims or the survivors. So those people who are residents have been destroyed very badly and have inappropriate for for living. They might lost their job. Uh, they help them. We help them to a sort or in a way of rehabilitating the community, the victims itself. All right. So now, that's it for now. We will continue on the next session, the the fifth and the sixth and the seventh uh, approach on mitigating the disaster. So for now, I would like you to write your thought, your opinion on preparing for the possible disaster risk, especially on mitigating and being prepared and giving response, and most especially giving a recovery chance to those who are being are victimized in this such different disasters. So now I would like you to go back to your Google link and comment your opinion or what you have learned from this video in a essay form, and you comment that one on our chat box on our Google meeting. All right, thank you so much for listening, and that's it for now. Thank you so much and goodbye.